Good evening. Okay, well, firstly, thanks, Becky, for inviting me to come and speak. It's a real honor to be here, especially considering such an amazing lineup of speakers we've got tonight. So, yeah, my name's Dan Forster. I'm an independent lettering artist and type designer, and this is a little snapshot of some of my work, which we'll get more into in a moment. So, the art of looking. So I was actually really delighted when Becky first invited me to come and speak about this, because it's actually something that I thought about quite a lot. And I've always believed or said that I think that observation accounts for at least 50% of being good at something. Maybe it's even more than that. So what has led me to believe this about observation is an experience that I had when I was younger. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about this. But before I do that, I firstly need to introduce you to my dad. So this is Tony Forster. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but he also happened to be a lettering artist and type designer, and a calligrapher as well. So this is a brief snapshot of some of his work, and he was just an incredibly versatile lettering artist. He was a true craftsman in every sense of the word. Everything that he made was 100% by hand. And I don't really have time to show you a great deal today, other than to say that he was amazing at what he did. And he also had some high praise. So in 2011, he was actually described by Tony Dispigna in Graphic magazine as the Herb Bell of England. So I was incredibly lucky to grow up with a creative dad. And there was one particular lesson that he taught me during my college years, and it's something that's really stayed with me ever since. And I'd say it's probably one of the most important lessons that I've ever been taught by anybody. So this was in 1995, and it was over the summer months. I was in between two different college courses in graphic design. But my dad had decided that in order to prepare me for the next course, he was going to give me some projects to do. And I was actually quite excited about this, because at the time I was also learning to use one of these. And I was really excited to create some work on it. And the reason I was excited is because also at the time, there was this kind of trend in the design industry, and I think some of you will probably remember this. And a lot of people were referring to it as new wave typography. But the designers were producing all these like really wild and crazy typographic designs. And I've always thought of it as kind of like the punk movement for graphic design, because it had just complete and utter disregard for the rules. It was totally rebellious. But for me as a young design student, I just thought it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I remember being like really excited to take some of these magazines and show my dad. So I burst into his studio one day and I was like, Dad, I've got these amazing magazines. It's this groundbreaking graphic design. What do you think? What do you think? And to say that I was disappointed with his reaction, it's an understatement. So these were his exact words. So he absolutely hated it. He was like, oh, this just has no typographical merit whatsoever. So I was kind of a bit dejected, but I was thinking, well, I'll still love this. And whatever project it is that he's going to give me, I'm just going to use my newfound computer skills and try and make something like this. But then my heart sank when he gave me the first project, which was this. So you can imagine my reaction. I was just devastated. I was like, what the hell? This is going to be torture. So the idea was to take this like 5-inch square, and I was actually tracing these A's, but the point was that they had to be perfect. So any slip of the pen or wobbly lines, and I'd just have to start over again. So I reluctantly got on with it. And I remember just drawing A after A after A after A. And when I thought I'd done a good one, I'd take it to my dad, and I was like, Dad, what do you reckon? And he would look at it, and he'd be like, no, you've got too much weight in this area, and this line's all wonky here, go and do some more. So this went on for the course of a few days, and I think by the end I must have drawn like 40 or 50 A's or something ridiculous. And I wish I kept them all, but this is actually the final A that I drew. And afterwards, my dad sat me down, and this is the lesson really, and he said, you'll never learn anything about the shapes or the proportions or the beauty of letter forms by just pressing a key on a keyboard. And this is something that's really stayed with me ever since. And it really drummed into me the importance of learning to look at and study and draw letters by hand and not get too sucked in by computers and the latest tech, which was kind of my dad's point. But looking back, I feel really lucky that my own dad could teach me this. And then there was a whole bunch of projects off the back of this, exploring various other things. And really, these were all exercises in drawing and hand skills, but they were also exercises in looking and observing. And these projects, they really did lay the groundwork for a lot of my work that I do today. And, well, it's led me to where I am today. So I spend a lot of time creating brand marks and logos and symbols. This is a large part of what I do. I also do a lot of decorative and illustrative lettering work as well, so quite flourished and highly embellished. And increasingly these days as well, typefaces. But I just feel that I owe all of this to my dad. You know, those early lessons, they really were the catalyst that set me off and opened my eyes to the detail and the nuances of type. So the next thing I'm just briefly going to talk about is seeking inspiration from outside sources. So for me, this means not just looking at type references all the time, which I can find myself doing if I'm not careful, but really just like looking outside of my own little bubble for different sources of inspiration to see if I can find something that might help me, take my work in a new direction. So for example, I remember this book when I was a student. I was doing lots of life drawing at college. And one thing that I always remembered it talked about was gravity. So the girl on the left, she's been drawn sitting in the chair. The girl on the right has actually been drawn lying down on the chair, but then the image has been reorientated. But what this does, it really highlights this effect of gravity and what it does to the body. And at some point I thought to myself, I wonder if this could actually apply to type. So I did a bit of experimenting. So this is actually the first iteration sketch from my own logotype. So just looking at this A here, there's nothing particularly wrong with it, but with this idea of gravity in mind, I did wonder what else might be possible. So I made another one. So this is before, and this is the after. And all I've really done is to adjust the weight placement. So I brought it down on the bowl and then lifted it up on the stem. And for me, it just makes the letter form feel much more kind of seated and relaxed and overall more pleasing shape, in my opinion. So I started to experiment a bit further. Yeah, these letters are having a bad day. So some of these were just really for fun, really. I was just curious about trying to introduce human characteristics into type. So here I was thinking about movement and motion and physics, and the idea here was to try and make the whole thing feel like it was dancing and add this sort of sense of rhythm and movement. And again, just thinking about the physics of the thing, it kind of makes sense that if this is the direction of travel of the strokes, then the weight is going to get thrown into these areas, because as it hits the bends, it slows down, and the weight starts to accumulate in these places. So it was this sort of thinking that kind of informed some of the weight placement decisions on this particular piece. Travel is something that never fails to inspire me. I've always been interested in trying to convey the sense or the feeling of the place just through using type and letters. So for example, whenever I think of Barcelona, I think of Gaudi and I think of Art Nouveau. In Jaipur, it was this sort of combination of smog and heat that created this permanent sort of shimmering haze sat on the horizon, which was something that I was trying to capture in the letter forms. So there's an elegance there, but there's also this disturbance at the same time. This was inspired by some of the architecture in Hanoi. So for instance, these double-line crossbars running through the center, these were inspired by this interior detailing that I kept spotting around the old town. And then the tail on the A was actually inspired by the shape of the temple roof. So I think by taking inspiration from non-typical sources and looking outside of your bubble and obviously not just thumbing through Instagram and Pinterest all the time. I think there's this opportunity to create interesting and different work. So that's me. Thank you very much.